Good afternoon, everybody. I think we'll make a start. I think a few people are coming in from the break, but let's kick off. Good afternoon. Hello. Way back in 2022, in my first year at PLS, I chaired a panel at the then PLS annual forum that discussed the efforts of a misguided government who were attempting to introduce an unnecessary copyright exception. Fast forward 3 years, and here we all are, and I'm again chairing a panel discussing the efforts of a misguided government trying to introduce a copyright exception. As former PLS Chief Executive Sarah Folder would say, there's nothing new here, Will, and how right she was. Anyway, so my name is Will Crook, and I'm the Head of Policy and Communications at Publishers Licensing Services. And I have assembled an expert panel here to discuss recent events in Westminster. And we'll have time for a very short Q&A at the end, so please get thinking of some questions to ask our panel. So on the panel we have Sarah Lloyd. Sarah is Group Communications Director and Global AI Lead at Pan Macmillan. We also have Seb Cuttill. Seb is the Parliamentary and Campaigns Manager at the News Media Association. And I've kind of labelled you as a de facto lead organiser of the Creative Rights in AI Coalition, so I hope that's acceptable. Or crack, if you so like. And I'm delighted to welcome an important voice from the AI sector, Tim Flagg, who's the Chief Executive of UKAI. Now, UKAI is the trade association for the UK AI sector, representing companies of all sizes with an interest in AI, from startups to industry leaders. So let's make a start. So now, it's obviously been a very busy year for publishing and copyright in Westminster. It even made the front page of some newspapers on a few occasions, thanks no less to some choice words from Sir Elton John. But first, I'd like to do some scene setting. So, Sarah, I'd like to ask you first, could you perhaps provide a publisher's perspective on this and how you feel publishers have reacted to the emergence of AI and how are they harnessing this fast-moving technology?
Hi, everyone. Hello to everyone still coming in. I'll talk a little bit. It's very difficult to talk about how the industry has responded to AI because I think there's been quite a mix. And in reality, there hasn't been a lot of public pronouncements by publishers about how they're harnessing AI. But I imagine there's been a healthy mix of consideration and caution amongst publishers. And I also think there's bound to have been a huge amount of experimentation. I certainly know that's where we are. Just stepping back a bit, thinking about sort of wider outside of publishing industry trends. I was reading in the McKinsey report, which is about the future of work, AI and work, and it says 92% companies are investing more in AI in the next 3 years, but while 1% of those believe their investments have reached any kind of maturity. And I think that's really true for publishing as well. So we're at the exploration investment stage and starting to explore what the benefits might be. In the same McKinsey report, it also says that employee usage for a third of their work or more is 3 times higher within organisations than their employers imagine, which is basically saying that the people that work for us are all using AI tools a load more than we think they are. And I think that's actually a mixture of terrifying and exciting, and that as leaders we need to be really sort of embracing that. But so I guess a kind of a summary of that is that AI isn't solving all the problems yet, but there's a lot of tactical adoption and a lot of experimentation. The other thing I'd say about sort of how publishing and the wider industry is responding to AI at the moment is that there's a real mix of stakeholder views, and that is everything from employees to authors to illustrators. And something I really want to say straight away is that it's not the case that all authors and creatives are anti-AI per se. I think that's really important to say. There was Society of Authors research last year which said that there's some authors are already using AI. So they're using it for research, summarization, brainstorming. And those stats were 1 in 10 illustrators, 3 in 10 translators, 2 in 10 fiction writers, and around a quarter, which is quite high, I think, of non-fiction writers, all saying that they're using generative AI in their work. And also around 3 in 10 illustrators and writers saying they're using it for brainstorming ideas. Now, those proportions I'm sure are growing because that was May 2024, but also in the same survey and in many other places as well, many authors and illustrators have expressed a lot of concern about AI, particularly about the copyright issue. So what we've been doing is obviously sort of navigating between these trends for concerns on the one side, but exciting opportunities on the other side. And just to talk about PanMac very specifically, our sense is with AI, the bus has left the station and we need to be on the bus. So we're navigating it, we're putting in a lot of guardrails. We basically started off with setting up some very, very clear sort of human first principles in the way that we approach AI. But we've been focusing on where can AI assist us? Where can it help us target promotion? Where can it help us build audience? Where can it help us with operational efficiencies? And we've been focusing as well on really equipping and informing our people so that they have AI skills, because without those, they won't be sort of fit for the way the world, the future as it is. But we've been also very focused on making sure with our human first principles that there's always a human in the loop. So we're looking at tools that will supplement rather than replace, and looking at ways that we can sort of scale up what we do more volume, reach underserved markets. So that's kind of how we've been responding. And I think to summarise all of that, I guess I'd say effectively in publishing at the moment we're in a big moment of transition. We're managing opportunities, we're also managing risks. And our thing at PanMac has just been to be as transparent as possible, as open as possible, and to bring everyone along with us. So I think that's a sort of summary of more PanMac specific, but hopefully will reflect some feelings of other publishers, I'm sure, as well.
So you mentioned about concerns with AI, and as I think maybe everybody in this room knows, in December last year, the government gave us all a very early Christmas present in the form of a 47-question consultation on AI and copyright. And safe to say, I think the main item was really the government's proposal for a package of measures around copyright and AI. That included a new copyright exception for text and data mining, with the rights reservation, and the introduction of transparency measures for AI models. Could you kind of briefly just give us a sense of what Pan Macmillan's response was to the consultation and what the government had proposed?
Yes, it will be brief because I think it was about 49 million questions in the consultation, and we wrote very full response for that. But just to kind of pull out a few headlines, I think I've already said it, but we were very, very clear in our response that we are not against AI, and that we see the economic benefits for the country, but also for potentially for publishing and business benefits as well. So we put ourselves firmly there because we thought that was really important to state before we went on to also examine some of the issues that we have with the consultation or with the preferred package in particular. Yeah. So our core principle that we brought to our response was that we want fair treatment for our authors, for our creators, for our books, and we want to make sure that the government realises that excuse me, if they undermine copyright in any way, they're also undermining sort of the effective protection of a multi-million-pound industry in publishing. And to boil it all right down, the 4 key things that we basically asked for were transparency, permission, remuneration, and attribution for work being used in generative AI systems. So that's, if you can remember 4 words, those were the key ones, I would say. But as part of that argument, we were also saying, look, we want to create a really valuable kind of proactive ecosystem here. We want harmonious growth between AI tech and publishers. And we were sort of saying, look, copyright, it has value for us and for the AI tech codes, because a really strong licensing framework would incentivize that high quality, or the investment in high quality content that we all create, which is then also crucial for the best AI models, and particularly when you come to sort of niche AI models. We also in our consultation and in some of the inputs that we gave to, for example, to James Frith when he had the Commons debate, we also got our author Kate Moss to contribute, and she said 2 things actually. She talked about the fact that she's not anti-AI, and lots of authors aren't anti-AI, and they can see the benefits of AI for giving them more time to create. But she also said, I'll quote it actually, the UK is one of the most thriving, innovative and profitable creative industries in the world, worth some 109 billion per year to the economy. Yet, rather than respect this, certain AI companies are taking our work without our permission and without remuneration, and ignoring the years we've spent in research, planning, writing, perfecting our work which contributes hugely to the UK economy. And I know that Kate has been speaking for a lot of other authors when she's written some of these pieces. That was a piece that she wrote for the Book Centre and we put into the consultation. So hopefully that gives you a summary without me actually telling you the 49 million responses that we wrote.
Thank you very much. Well, the government are currently looking through those 49,000 words.
I think they're using AI to actually analyse.
I don't believe they are, to be fair, so I'll just put that on record.
That's just a myth.
It's a myth, I believe, okay. So yes, thankfully a myth. So Seb, if I could turn to you now. Now, when the consultation was published around that area, around that time, I should say, as part of efforts to organise the creative industries in our campaign to protect the UK's copyright framework, the Creative Rights in AI Coalition were formed, and I think it's roughly about 70 plus organisations from across the creative industries, including PLS, and obviously the coalition's work has been really quite visible, especially through the Make It Fair campaign, as I think a few people here will know that on the last day of the consultation, I think it was every front page of every national newspaper carried the Make It Fair campaign's banner and campaigning slogan. Very impressive stuff. But my question to you is, when you formed the coalition, Seb, what were your expectations for it? And in what ways do you think the coalition and the Make It Fair campaign have been effective? And the kind of third part of this question is, do you think it's a blueprint for future creative industry campaigning on copyright and other matters?
Sure. So, I mean, the coalition was actually formed out of a profound sense of social embarrassment, because at Labour Party conference last year, I organised a panel on copyright and AI, and no one turned up. There were a few people, but I'd invited Sarah all the way to Liverpool and presented her with an empty auditorium. And later on in the bar, I was speaking to some colleagues, and we were just flabbergasted by the sheer volume of events run by AI companies, the tech lobby, and the phalanxes of ministers who were very eager to associate themselves with that industry, precisely because they were telling such a compelling story about UK growth and the future of their industry. And in contrast, I think it's fair to say that the creative industries can sometimes be a tad disunited in their campaigning, but when you considered the sort of the disastrous nature of what we knew the government were going to propose, the level to which big tech have managed to infiltrate the very highest levels of policy making within government, and frankly the speed with which the government wanted to implement their plan, I think a sort of core group of us decided that complete unity across the sector was unlikely, but it was our best shot. And sort of the product of that maybe unlikely unity, as Will said, has been some very high-profile campaigning, and it's worked precisely because the government can be under no illusions that even though it might have been newspapers on the front page, even though it might have been Baroness Kidron standing up in the Lords on the data bill, the entire creative industries has been behind it. And in terms of whether it's a blueprint for creative industries campaigning in the future, I would hope it's not necessary. I would hope that the government never again produces a policy so incendiary and so not backed up by technical detail. But I certainly think if they go again in another 3 years, in another 5 years, we can roll that out again.
Excellent, thank you very much. And you mentioned Baroness Kidron, and you've worked closely with Baroness Kidron to amend the data bill and to include transparency requirements for AI models. And sadly, the government, they weren't included in the final bill, but amazingly, the government were defeated 5 times over this matter, and in the House of Lords, I should add. And how do you perceive the general sentiment of MPs and Lords to this matter? Is it party political? Is there a broader sympathy to the creative industries and what we're asking for? And what do you think it would take for the government to actually listen to this?
Sure. I mean, the Lords were and are absolutely apoplectic, and it takes quite a lot to rouse some of them. So that in itself is quite impressive. And I think they were so frustrated because not to get too much into the sort of the chicanery of parliamentary procedure, but normally if the government are defeated once or twice by the Lords, they come up with a meaningful concession. And the fact that the government weren't willing to do that, I think, is indicative of a feeling at the very top of government that there are forces in the US, both in Silicon Valley, in the White House, that they cannot piss off. And that is deeply worrying if the ministers and the Secretary of State, who are meant to manage a bill, are not able to have the agency to change course because of interests so far outside of their own control. And in terms of Labour MPs, there's sort of been a small coterie who have been very vocal, but I have been shocked by the number of MPs who I didn't know knew about copyright, and people who were even serving in quite senior positions in government who have got in touch privately to offer their good wishes and support. So I think if the government don't change course, if they do bring forward an AI bill in the next year, 2 years, and proceed down this path, they are going to face an even stiffer resistance. And as you alluded to, it is of course cross-party. The Conservatives, the Greens, the Lib Dems, even Reform supported this. But I think what will really be crucial in the future is having Labour MPs being a little bit more vocal, a little bit more willing to defy the government. And I think that is likely because it is just so antithetical to core Labour values, what the government is proposing. You know, Labour are currently forcing through an employment rights bill, which, despite the calls of many businesses, is going to give a lot more protections to workers. But then in this case, on copyright, they are removing the property rights of 2.4 million people in the UK on the one hand, and then putting the onus on them to defend their property against the most powerful companies that have ever existed. It just doesn't make sense from a traditional Labour perspective.
Yeah, I totally agree with having Labour MPs become a bit more rebellious, which has been in the news a lot this week. And I mean, I think from my experience in Westminster, from the MPs I've worked for, I think once you start rebelling, and certainly for a lot of those new MPs, it's very difficult to stop once they've kind of got into that zone. So perhaps that might be a factor in future, you can only hope. Tim, turning to you now, to get an AI sector perspective on this, and as the trade body for the AI sector, what has been UKAI's view on the government's approach to copyright in AI? And from your perspective, how do you feel the UKAI sector has reacted to the creative industry campaign that Seb's been describing?
Yeah, well, firstly, thank you for having me here. It's really a privilege to be able to come and talk to you about copyright. I think one of the first points I'd like to make is just to try and define what AI is, because it's often a term which is used very broadly. Within AI, there are lots of different types of companies and lots of different types of AI broadly. So the conversation which we're having around copyright really only impacts upon Gen AI companies, the generative AI companies that are making large language models. And the majority of the companies that are building those large language models are American big tech companies. There's not many British companies who are building those. So I'd say that's the sort of first point I wanted to just define. Now, when you look at the British companies and the companies who are investing in AI services and tools in the UK, they're very different in what they're making. So they're using things like data science. We have a lot of our members who are using data science techniques in healthcare, or they're using other forms of natural language processing. Or they're taking some of those Gen AI models and they're building services and tools upon them. So a lot of our members are creating SaaS platforms, software as a service that companies can use and plug in to help with marketing or with HR. So the domestic UK industry, the AI industry in the UK, is making those services and tools that rely upon Gen AI, but they're different from Gen AI. So I know it's quite a nuanced point, but I think it's important to make that. Now, the reason that I wanted to make that was because we've been on quite a journey. So when we started the year and we started looking at what was going on, we suddenly had a lot of people saying, oh, already there's mistrust around AI. And suddenly the copyright debate, people are saying, well, those AI companies are trying to steal, those AI companies are taking our work unfairly, those AI companies. And we started to question, well, what is going on here? And as an AI industry, the domestic British companies who are using AI, what's our position on this? And I refer to it as a journey because I think we wanted to understand, as a trade body who represents British companies, what our position should be. So we started to engage, we started to ask those questions. We went to roundtables, we organised roundtables where we brought together the creative sector and our members, the technologists, and MPs and peers as well. One of the things that I think was really interesting in some of those roundtables that we organised and other roundtables that we've been to was when you start putting people together, you start to realise that people want to collaborate and find solutions together. And there's really a lot of overlap between the creative industry and the technology sector. I've worked many times in the creative sector as well, and a lot of my friends and family work in the creative sector, and the same with the opposite side. People, we're not different, but this debate and the way it's been framed by the government's decision to make that preference for opt-out early on has brought both industries into conflict. And it's so unhelpful, and it's wasted so much time, and it's fundamentally undermined the trust that we as an industry need to build. So, I've referred back to the fact that there's already quite a lot of consumer mistrust in AI out there. That's one of our biggest problems. And when I talk to our members who are, I mentioned, are selling, making services and tools, they're trying to get everyday people to use those services and tools. They're trying to get employees in organisations to use those new AI tools. And if there's mistrust there, then that's going to hamper that process. That's not going to allow economic growth. Now, this whole conflict that's happened over the last few months has made that situation worse. It's undermined trust because people are saying, well, AI is going to end the world, it's going to take my job, and now it's coming from my copyright as well. So as we went through that journey, we realised those two things. One, that we can really collaborate. There's a lot we can collaborate on. But two, trust is really important. And that's where we've kind of ended up, is that we really believe, and our members believe, that actually if the AI industry, the UK's AI industry, is going to succeed, then it needs to build that consumer trust. And the only way it can do that is by being responsible and fair. So actually this whole journey that we've been on has forced us to focus on what do we want the AI industry in the UK to look like. Do we want to be forced down a path of being able to just take what we're given? The Prime Minister talks about, are we makers or takers? But actually in this instance, do we want to take the ethics from big tech? Or do we want to actually say, well, we have principles and values here in the UK that actually we can set out what it means to be a responsible and ethical AI industry? We firmly believe in the latter. And over the last few months, as we started to get more and more involved in this and having these debates, we've realised that we do support the copyright laws as they are. We believe there are solutions which you can build upon copyright, and we believe that's fundamental to being fair. And I think you'd asked me about my perspective on the government's view and where they are now. That's the big question mark for us. So, the Secretary of State has expressed regret. I think that's the closest we're going to get to an apology. And he set out a time frame and said that he wants to set out some working groups to bring all sides of this debate together. So we welcome that. I think we have to welcome that because we support the government. If they're true to their word, then that's definitely a good thing. And we support the government, but we also support the creative industries and our members to come together in those working groups. So right now, I'm optimistic that if we can get involved, UKAI can help convene some of those working groups by bringing all of the sides of this discussion together to start to use technology to find solutions to some of the challenges which we face. But the government also has to deliver on that side as well.
Yeah, excellent. I think you kind of touched upon it quite a bit in your answer, but is the government's approach, does that actually accurately reflect the actual needs of the UK AI sector and its potential future, such as smaller language models, for example, more bespoke models that could be developed in the UK? And if not, why are they not focusing on that?
Yeah, so I think it is one of those industries that has grown very quickly, right? So the AI industry is still very new. And it's based upon technology which is moving very quickly. In fact, UKAI started sitting down with the new Labour government back in August, who, by their own admission, they admitted they didn't know that much about AI, but they wanted to. And that was the thing. Back then, they were actually saying they wanted to understand how AI works. That's the big challenge for us, and also an opportunity, but it's the challenge is that people just don't understand what AI is. You know, as one of the first points I made, but also people don't understand how it works. And even within the technology industry, it's moving so quickly. So part of our role as a trade body for AI is to go and educate the MPs and the peers. We regularly run roundtables where we bring industry into Parliament and we engage on specific topics, not just on copyright. So that's a key part of what we're doing. We're creating a primer for parliamentarians on AI so they can understand how it works and what it looks like. So I suppose that the key point there is that, you know, to give them some credit, it's a hard topic to be able to get your head around. But you have to have some intent. You have to want to understand it. And you know, I understand they do have other priorities. There's lots of other things, lots of other burning bridges, unfortunately, at the moment, which they have to deal with. But they need to understand this one as well. And in terms of how they address the smaller, so the opportunities for UK businesses, we're seeing now that the UK has always been very good at the service industries. And so actually we see the role of the domestic AI industries being able to provide expertise in the service industries, whether that be finance, law, education. And because we have the language and the culture, I think that the UK can really lead in those areas. And by the way, that might mean that if we do manage to set ourselves up as a responsible and ethical leader, then the UK's legal centre could actually be a global centre of expertise in responsible and ethical AI as well. So there's lots of opportunities for the UK to lead.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Tim. So just kind of open up the question, open up the discussion slightly here. Obviously, we've touched upon the government are kind of looking at the consultation responses, all 11,500 odd of them. It's likely to take some time, but when the government does respond to the consultation, very briefly, what would you like it to say, and what do you actually think it would say? It is going to say. Seb, if I could kind of start with you first, and maybe go down the panel, if you could briefly predict slightly what you think the outcome of this consultation will be, and kind of what you would like for it to come out of it.
Sure. I mean, I think unfortunately, maybe not the response to the consultation itself, but the ultimate government decision will be dictated by events that happen outside of Parliament and perhaps even outside of the UK. One of the key issues that isn't touched on so much is extraterritoriality, and that's the principle of whether if an AI firm trains their model in San Francisco or in Japan, but then they market it back in the UK, should they have had to have trained that model as if they had to comply by UK copyright law? If the government, which they have been saying, says no, you can do whatever you like if you train overseas and then flog it here, opt in or opt out becomes irrelevant. That question really doesn't matter. And that question is being looked at currently in the Getty Images case. The technical term is secondary infringement. So I think the outcome of that Getty Images case, if it actually transpires that extraterritoriality has applied all along, then the government will have to go back to the drawing board, and the consultation response will just be a big question mark.
Sarah, what would your prediction be?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any predictions at all, and I'm definitely not as expert as Seb in all of the sort of government and parliamentary aspects of all of this, but you know, my ideal, in my dream world, would be that they recognise that the existing copyright framework that we have is like gold standard, leads the world, and that is not a detrimental thing when it comes to AI development, and particularly, as Tim was saying, not detrimental when it comes to AI sort of frameworks that will support really, really valuable AI in our country as opposed to elsewhere. Yeah. Because as you were saying, Tim, you know, there are all sorts of like niche AI services and products built on really particular sections of content that we publish here, you know, in world-leading ways in the UK, which I could see could be very valuable and would bring money to this economy. And, you know, some of the things, in a way, what the sort of preferred package that they went into the consultation with, that would support great growth for, I don't know, people in America or in other parts of the world, but not necessarily as the sort of they had 2 + 2, but it didn't add up in terms of what they were suggesting. So, you know, as I say, in my dream world, they would just be saying, look, we have this fantastic copyright regime. We absolutely mustn't water it down, not just so that we can protect the 100x billion that we have from the creative industries in the UK, but also so that we can have a really thriving AI industry here based on some of that content. And that, you know, that would be brilliant. But also, as we were asking for in the data bill, but didn't get through, the transparency requirements, which is absolutely, everything else builds on that. If we don't have transparency, we don't know what things have been trained on. We can't seek for all the rest of it, the permission, the license, etc. So that's the fundamental thing that we really need them to shift on. And it's not great as a sort of signal, I suppose, that was roundly rejected in the data bill. But yeah, those are the two things, I think: transparency and keep copyright as it is.
Tim.
Yeah, I think I'll restate part of what I was saying before about seizing the opportunity for the UK to lead. I think that is what I would love the government to come out of this consultation and realise that actually they have a massive opportunity here for the UK to lead in responsible and ethical AI development. Not just you know, isolationist as the UK, but actually working collaboratively, because this doesn't just affect the UK, it's all the other countries who aren't the US or China, frankly. You know, and if we can collaborate with them, they are also facing some of these challenges as well. So I think that's the number one thing I'd love to see. Practically, I think we have 2 phases of discussions to go through in these working groups. The first is the technical questions. We mentioned some of them in terms of detection, attribution, remuneration, you know, the technical aspects of licensing, and then some of the accountability and transparency questions as well. We need to get into those in the working groups, but they will need quite a lot of discussion, debate, and agreement and compromise. So I think there's those 2 phases, the technical and then the more sort of strategic or commercial considerations as well. But I think those will be the main things we'll see.
Excellent, thank you very much. Now, we're running a little bit late on things, but I'd like to do at least 5 minutes of, of Q&A. So if we could have some very, very pithy questions, that would be great. Is there anybody in the audience who has a question for our panel? Please raise your hand. Lady in the middle there.
Hi there, I'm Priya Sahadev and I'm doing some work with Oxford University looking at collective licensing models for the AI era. I'm going to ask you to look back into your crystal ball, and maybe this is a question for Seb. In the recent Creative Industry Sector Plan, the government completely randomly, to my mind, referred to this concept of setting up a creative content exchange, which seemed to be a government-run marketplace for licensing. I'd be interested if any of the panel have any insight on what that is and why it's been introduced.
I think we could do a whole new session on that, if I'm honest. But Seb, could you have any kind of initial thoughts on the creative?
Sure. Firstly, I owe you an email, so sorry about that. Secondly, I think the government may have sort of gone a couple of steps ahead, and they may have believed that the only reason that licensing is taking place is because it's too complex and it's too difficult for AI firms to identify the different rights holders. And of course, licensing is very complex, but sort of going straight to creating a marketplace before getting the fundamental copyright law and the transparency right is just very premature, and unfortunately I think it has echoes of the original preferred option in the consultation, where they've come up with a very grand idea but with no technical basis to support it.
Tim, is there any views on the
Perfect answer.
creative content exchange?
Yeah, I think just to build on what Seb was saying, that it's premature. I think you need to go through those logical steps of trying to understand what the technical solutions look like, have the commercial discussions, and then if this is right, if this is a solution that can fit into that, that'd be great. I think if the government could be an important player in being able to balance licensing of data models, but it feels very premature.
Any other questions? Gentlemen there.
Hello, JL, Zigzag Education, educational publisher. the government is reluctant to put up taxes too much because people might leave the UK. On a similar note, if it goes badly and another country says, if you publish in our country, then it is protected by law, even if it's published somewhere else, could that mean pressure on the government to avoid publishers or move into another country in that way? Maybe that's a bit far ahead. I know that's not your focus at the moment.
Anybody want to take on that? Sarah, do you have a view on that? If it became difficult for publishers to do business here, would it?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately that could be an outcome, couldn't it? I think the reality of businesses having to move. There's always that said about industries, isn't it? That if you make certain laws, then they'll all move elsewhere. I think in reality they don't all, but it would certainly turn into a consideration. I mean, London in particular, rightly or wrongly, has been a real centre of publishing, particularly trade publishing. Obviously, there's been the other sort of university towns with academic publishers as well. And we are a real centre of expertise, and it would be a shame to sort of for the government to give any encouragement for us to think about being based elsewhere. Yeah. I can't predict whether that would definitely happen.
I would just add, obviously, there's for UK newspapers a small likelihood that they'd go and register somewhere else, but obviously the government is really thirsting after inward investment from big tech firms, even though these big tech firms will be promising vast investment to every decent-sized economy in the world. And I think they have underrated the extent to which a strong copyright framework attracts investment as well. I think Canal Plus did an IPO in London about half a year ago, and in the press conference, when the CEO was asked, why have you chosen to IPO in London, his first answer was, your strong copyright law.
Excellent.
Yeah, I think that's a really very good example of where the UK does lead. And actually, we should be quite bullish about the fact that the UK has very unique assets. I mean, I don't need to tell all of you, because you are working in a sector with the language and with culture and the knowledge and the expertise which the UK has. And I think we shouldn't forget that.
Excellent. Okay, I'm running massively over time. I can see our timekeeper is getting very angry with me. So I will say, coming up next, Manisha Shah, our new chair, will be coming up on stage to introduce the keynote. So please don't go anywhere, but there'll be a little bit of a changeover. And finally, just very quickly, many thanks to the panel for giving up their time, for coming in to talk to everybody today. So yeah, please give them a big round of applause. Thank you.